our next session now is all about transport. Transport is the second largest contributor to carbon emissions in Liverpool. So what's travel going to look like in the future, in 2050? Hydrogen, electric, pedal, or people-powered, or is it all just going to be cars, as it is now? We've got some experts now to share their thoughts, and we're going to start off with Ed Gommon, and Ed's going to talk to us now about the modal shift to active travel. Ed.
Thank you very much. I'm more of a enthusiastic amateur than an expert, actually. There you go. Just a quick point on the date. So 2050 is the date we've gone for. So the IPCC says that we have to get to net zero by 2050 globally. So that means that in the UK we've got to get to net zero by 2040. This is from the Tyndall Centre there. That's what that explains there. So break down the carbon budgets for the UK. We need to get to net zero earlier than 2050. So I'm going to say we need to get to the transport system that's net zero by 2040. It's not just me that says that, this is the City Region's target. So the City Region has a target of net zero by 2040, and Liverpool City Council has a net zero target of 2030. So, which is incredibly ambitious, and I support their ambition. It's pretty amazing. I think it's going to be a massive challenge getting to net zero by 2030, but I can see the validity of putting a target in early rather than putting it back. This is the last target I'm going to throw at you. So the government wants to get to, the UK government want half of all journeys in cities and towns to be cycled or walked or wheeled by 2030. So it's incredibly ambitious. So what's the direction of travel? As you can see, all we've done over the last 40 years or so is increase the amount of cars that we have on the roads. Even just from like the diesel Glavo levels, that's from like the second one there, that's from like 1990. We put 10 million cars on the road from then. Transport is the second largest contributor to carbon emissions, as you can see in Liverpool. Not all those carbon emissions are associated with cars, but at least over 60% of them are. So basically, as you can see here, so like 62% of trips of cars, only 1.2% are made by a bike. If we have any net zero strategy, it's going to have to revolve around getting a lot of cars off the road. There is no way of getting to net zero without doing this modal shift away from this 62% cars and 1% bike. So we need probably to get it to another, increase the bikes to like 24%, which is incredibly ambitious over the next 20 years. Let's see what the next slide is. Okay, so one of the main barriers to why people aren't getting on the bikes, I think, is this one quite telling statistic. So just over a third of people think cycling is safe for their neighbourhood, and just under a third think it's safe for their kids to cycle. So that is absolutely huge. Liverpool, sorry about this, that's a horrible picture for people who know this guy. But so Liverpool's track record on cycling is terrible. And this, people try and do stuff, try and do positive things. People react against it, and then things get taken out. So what needs to be done and what can be done? Just going to get that for 2 minutes, 50 seconds. I should take this one out. I'm not much ahead. So, leadership, communication. So this is Andi Armitage, she's the Mayor of Paris. She's been re-elected twice with incredibly ambitious targets for reducing carbon, just like taking action. So stuff where mayors or elected officials want to say, oh, we can't do that, we get not get elected again. She's done it. Road traffic neighbours in many homes. So it's particularly in London, it's all over London, Northern Forest. There's a project running in Liverpool now as well, trying to bring this in. So I think this is going to be some of the stuff that we do in the future. This we did a bid last year when we were looking at where we could put some road traffic neighbourhoods. This is actually that's where the pilot is. But it's not just running that's Sustrans, so that was kind of worth ambitious. We need to remove on-street parking. So Paris again, they're just taking off like 60,000 parking spots. So I think what you need to do every year, you need to just target how many you want to take out, so you start taking them out. And so for me, I'm just thinking about like Hardman Street and places like that, Hoop Street, there's loads of places to do it.
Cars out of the city centre, that's Birmingham's plan. So Birmingham has a plan to just
effectively make it so you can't drive through the city centre, you have to go around. Paris has got a similar plan, and I think this is one ideas have been put out there about 5 years slowly chunking off bits and making them low traffic or stopping cars coming through. We've seen it work in Bold Street and Castle Street, it's much better now than they they take the cars away. Car-free days, so Liverpool, which we're going to talk about, the car-free day in 2019 was absolutely amazing. I've been trying to get people interested in moduling. It's one of those things. I don't think people understand unless they actually experience it. You can try and tell people to imagine how different it will be, but until they experience it, they don't know. And the last thing is this active travel stakeholder forum, which we, Elke and Andi, have been involved in, getting the city council set up. It's not started yet, and so it's just a question of, I'm not sure how it's going to go, but we're hoping the council will work with the citizens and we can work together to do better outcomes for better lives. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ed. That was a really sinister stop at the end. So, thank you very much. There we go. Coming back now. So our second speaker now is Elke, and Elke's going to talk to us about why active travel is a solution to more than one problem. Elke.
So I'm here today to speak to you as both a cycling campaigner and as a reader in television studies at Edge Hill University, where I'm currently involved in a project with Belinda over there, which looks at climate change in the community. So everyone hands up. Everyone. So who commutes to work or school by car? Okay. Your hands up. Sorry, it is well. So do you see the same cars every day, do you think? So keep your hands up. Sorry. Have you started saying hello to drivers that you recognise? That has created a chuckle. Now this is interesting because it seems to be funny. Yes, of course you don't say hello to the drivers. Have you met people in that way? Well, I thought the only person that you meet is my rider talking to his car, right? So your car starts talking back at you, maybe. Now, those of us who cycle or take a bus or anything like that, hands up if you have started saying hello to people. Sorry, who's met people that way? For example. So I thought this is quite funny because they were very, very uncomfortable shoes for the walking chat. So that's why this picture is there. Anyway, so what this basically highlights is that active travel is good for you in many ways. Obviously, it's good, as Ed has just pointed out, for the planet. It's obviously good for your health because you get your exercise in, but it's also about community, and it's the community bit that I want to talk to you today about. So Belinda and I's project has basically found that there's 3 branches to a sustainable community, and the first one is the sense of community, which is about sense of belonging, identity, etc. And the second one is about climate justice. That goes along with air quality, for example. It also goes along with how warm your house is, depending on how much money you have, your house tends to be better insulated. But it also goes along with ideas of equality and inclusion, including things like, if you're rich, you can afford things that make things cheaper. But if you're poor, you have to have an electricity meter. And that's significantly more expensive than not. Now, in addition to these 3 branches, we have 3 levels of communicative facilitation: person-to-person interaction, information and education that you can get from the web, but also self-representation. So our project is also involved with television, basically. And the person-to-person conversation is actually all about our relationship, how we relate to each other as people. So this is a really, really important element. Now these pictures are both from Berlin. The left hand is towards, what's it called? The old wall, basically, and it's just cars. All you can see is cars, it's machines. On the other hand, we have people, and you can look at people. So when we build our streets around cars, what happens is it's mostly about the individual. I am in my car, and I need to get somewhere, and maybe I need to get my family somewhere, but that's all. But if we make build the streets in that way, it makes it less usable for other road users. and that includes cyclists who are in Liverpool really, really unsafe, to be honest. How often are we all overtaken at close pass? I cannot tell you. That requires more car use because it feels so unsafe, so we're using more cars, right? And that's making it obviously even less positive. This is obviously Los Angeles, which is one of the worst places for that, and there's really interesting research around that. But if you have lots and lots of cars, and you build the streets around car use, what happens is you disable community, and that's particularly visible in Scotland Road. Scotland Road had the highway through Liverpool built over it, and it's just terrible. But that also means that you disempower the community to become part of the solution. So this is a picture from our climate assembly where we got people together who didn't know each other, they started talking to each other, and the outcomes of it were absolutely amazing. So yeah, that was me. Please get in touch. I'd really love to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. At the end, actually, I will go around everyone again and get everyone to share their contact details just as we finish. So thank you. And our final speaker now is Andi Armitage, and Andy is going to talk to us about why this isn't the Netherlands. Andy.
It's coming. Apologies for the washing out the screen there.
Hi, so I'm Andi Armitage, the misunderstood optimist. This isn't the Netherlands. Bit of a surrealist start, but this looks like the Netherlands to me. Windmill, bike, canal. All we need is somebody riding a bike wearing a pair of clogs. There it is. This isn't the Netherlands, a common response on Twitter when people are arguing about cycling in the UK. It's different there, it's flat and it doesn't rain. 137 days of rain in the Netherlands and 132 days of rain in the UK. Where is your helmet? Like rollouts, common thing said on the internet about cycling in the UK. But cycling in the Netherlands is normalised. People riding bikes, wearing normal clothes, doing normal things, getting about their normal everyday activities. This isn't the Netherlands. Amsterdam, 1971, 2020. Funny enough, the Netherlands wasn't the Netherlands back then. It was pretty much like it is in the UK now. Amsterdam wasn't bike-friendly in the 70s. It was terrible, traffic was terrible, and they only improved by restricting cars. Once they restricted cars, the other alternatives became viable again. Walking, cycling, and scooting. In the 1970s, change in Amsterdam streets were met with similar opposition and vandalism that many UK cities are experiencing today, as we attempt to transform our own streets into shared space for people, bikes, buses and cars. Amsterdam children were fighting in the streets. In 1972, a documentary about traffic in the De Pip neighbourhood, the rage of the white van driver, resolute to carry on with his driving through the streets. This isn't the Netherlands, really. 25% of roads are physically separated from motor traffic in the Netherlands. 31% have clearly marked cycle lanes. On the other roads and streets, bicycles and motors share the same space and have shared space with pedestrians. When enough space is available, larger roads are filled with feedback bike paths. This is physically separated, but not all cycle paths in the Netherlands are separated. As we can see here, we have what we would pretty much see in the UK, a non-segregated cycle lane. The difference is drivers are educated and they share the space with cyclists. The Fietsstraat, or bicycle street, is a road where cyclists are the primary user, characterised by red surface and prominent branding. As you can see here, cyclists and drivers share that space. They are low speed, optimised for cycle-friendly traffic, and be intended as a low-cost, politically popular way to create a connected network of streets. They are clearly branded, as you can see, and through the design solutions, make it clear that cyclists have priority and drivers must give way. Woonerven and Woonerf are home zones and living streets. and it's a type of Dutch residential street developed in the 1970s to be safe and quiet with limited traffic. Woonhaven encourages shared space principles. Pedestrians can use the full width of the road, and playing is also allowed. Imagine that. Children cycle to school in the Netherlands compared to 2% in the UK. Here is how a school zone in the Netherlands is designed to slow driver speeds. Road design shapes driver behaviour. This isn't the Netherlands. The principles of Woonhaven: visible entrances, physical barriers, shared and paved space, and landscaping and street furniture. The features that you see in those images aren't dissimilar to the high-density streets that we see in Liverpool and around the UK. But it takes time. It's taken decades, but not always. 2020, 2022, Amsterdam. Transformation in 2 years on one street. This is what we would define as state-of-the-art cycling infrastructure in Liverpool. This is going to be the de facto model that will be applied across the city. As we can see, this isn't the Netherlands. We're supposed to see cycling infrastructure as the glass half full in Liverpool, and the answer glass is half full. I see the cycling infrastructure in Liverpool as the glass on the left. It's still half full, but its design makes it impossible to use effectively and safely. This isn't the Netherlands, but it could be.
Thank you very much. That's threatened up now with all my daytime television presenter. Orange microphone. Watch out for the cables as we go along. I'm going to have a bit of a Q&A now. A couple of thoughts from me, if I may. First of all, and this is possibly the journalist in me, there's a bit of a tendency, I think, sometimes to see transport change in terms of big, massive projects, probably heavy rail projects, of course. So it's always good to see the sort of difference that can actually be made in a much more low-key, local, and indeed cheaper way, but it can make more of a difference to more people. Also, I do like the point you made, Andy, about the Netherlands. Those pictures of before and after pictures are quite striking. There's a bit of a tendency, isn't there, to see the Netherlands and its use of public transport and bikes as some kind of alien world that's so different from ours it's not manageable. Not actually true at all. The journalist in me, though, is going to start with a simple question to all three of you, which is this. We can all look at these things and all say they're great, but we know the challenges politically of getting some of these things through. And for those of you who haven't seen the battles over LTNs in certain parts of London, it's politically polarising. How would, I'll start with you, and I'll go on panel, how would you persuade a councillor who's got 1 year to go for their next election that what they need to do is start lessening the use of cars in Liverpool and getting more people on foot and on bike?
Depends which councillor, which ward they're in. But I mean, I think basically I would say, if they're in Liverpool, I'd say, listen, you've got your net zero 2030 target. There's zero chance of getting to that target without taking action now. Instead of taking action today in order to get there. It's not my job. You need to sell that to your constituents. You need to explain that to your constituents. So yeah, so I'd say show some leadership, and I'd say I'd have to support you with getting evidence and putting stuff together for you so you can make that argument and make that case. But yeah, you're going to have to get out there.
Totally agree. There are some areas where you can basically expect to be re-elected very easily, so these people really have nowhere to hide, I'm afraid. But what I find particularly relevant with what Ed was just saying, it's about actually taking the leadership rather than being led by public opinion. And if we can actually show, and I think this is the wonderful thing that we found with the climate assemblies, there is significant wish to see things transformed, particularly in Wavertree. For example, our high street is a car sewer at the moment, and people are really passionate about seeing that change, but they cannot get the buy-in, and that's really we have a full plan. There's two residents who've developed a full plan for the redesign of the high street, and nothing is being done. And I think, to be honest, it's not about convincing councillors, it's the councillors getting some backbone.
My answer would be to just ask them what do they want. I'd show them those pictures that I've just shown everybody in the room. Do you want it to look like it it did in Amsterdam in the Netherlands in 1972, or do you want it to look like it does now in 2022? You know, it's a pretty simple stark contrast. And also I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding from a political point of view that there's a very vocal minority, and cars make a lot of noise, so do car owners and car drivers. When you actually look at some of the statistics on discussions that have taken place, for instance on Route 6 in Liverpool, which goes from Walton to city centre, there were 400 responses on a local consultation. Only 158 people opposed that scheme, yet the council have withdrawn that scheme completely. So, you know, listen to what people want is what I would say, and look to all of the other bits of the jigsaw to understand why we need to make those changes.
So just in terms of my council, that's what I would say, where I am at Princess Park, I'd say organise a car through there, Lodge Lane, and see how that goes, and get feedback from that.
Yeah, thanks. I should say it also wasn't any particular party or councillors. It's a pretty cross-party thing, I think, isn't it, in fairness? And I will express a slight frustration at seeing some of the streets closed off during the pandemic, which then reopened again, which seemed like a wasted opportunity. But there we go. Something else I was taken by that came up in more than one presentation is that this isn't just about transport. There's an awful lot more benefit of that. So if you look at the main here, you're looking at some of the pictures of derelict shops on what were formerly main roads. There's so much more benefit, isn't there, that comes of taking cars off streets and making them more pedestrian and cycle friendly.
Yeah, so there's quite significant research that shows that, for example, cyclists actually spend significantly more money locally, as do obviously pedestrians. So cars just drive places. For example, where I live, you know, cars drive quite a lot to Edge Lane, and there is shops like Next, and you know, all the big ones basically. And my high street is really not usable for pedestrians and cyclists because there's so many cars on it. It's really dangerous. It is significantly better for businesses as well to have a space that is actually inviting and inviting people to go there rather than to drive through.
And looking at the Netherlands as well, I find it's interesting that people often come back from holidays to places like the Netherlands and they're amazed by the quality of the street life and how accessible things are and all the little shops and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of that actually comes, doesn't it, from the sort of that culture they have now of being cycle and pedestrian friendly.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a very polarised perspective of cycling and walking in the UK, where it has to be separate from everything else. And in certain situations, we do need to have segregated walking and cycling. But in a lot of other spaces, we can actually use a variety of different designs, and that's what we need to do. And you know, that culture doesn't happen instantly, but it doesn't have to take decades. We can make the changes pretty quickly. And my vision is that we should have all roads and spaces that are safe for walking and cycling, and we can do that through design intervention and slowing traffic down, reducing traffic. As we go down that journey and reducing the traffic, it gets safe to walk and cycle, so more people walk and cycle, so traffic reduces, and it then just becomes exponential, and it just becomes a much more pleasant place for everybody to live.
Thank you very much. To stop me from going on about the most boring photo I ever took, which is my favourite transport picture ever, I'm going to open up to the audience. Does anyone else want to ask any questions? If you do, let me know and I'll bring the mic over just for the audience.
Could I have your thoughts about what's coming over the horizon, which is autonomous self-drive vehicles, in the sense that once vehicles are self-driving, they don't have to be owned by people, they're just a form of transport that can be summoned. And once people don't own vehicles, there aren't 75% of their cars parked outside their houses for most of the day. So I just wondered what you thought of this trend that's going to come upon us.
The image that comes to my mind is the Johnny Cab in science fiction, Total Recall, the remake of Total Recall as well. And, you know, I think we're a long way off having a fully autonomous vehicle that has the intelligence to avoid obstacles. You know, I've seen videos only today where the trials are failing, where cars are driving into trains and driving into people. I do take your point of if we have autonomous vehicles that are shared vehicles, so effectively the joint cab, yes, it could be one of the possible solutions. Currently, it looks like the autonomous vehicle is replacing the privately owned vehicle, and currently, if you look at the size of the vehicle, whether it be autonomous, whether it be electric or petrol-driven, it takes up the same amount of space as it currently does. So the real solution is to reduce the amount of vehicles and make the vehicles that we are using smaller. So yes, I think it possibly has a place in the future makeup, but I think we're a long way off the technology. My background actually is I'm a product design engineer, so maybe I should have talked about autonomous vehicles. Maybe I'll be at next time.
Yeah, just to, I think they're a long way off autonomous vehicles. Probably they might not ever actually be fully realised in terms of the amount of money that's gone into them so far and what we're up to now. And the other options really are car sharing, so just good old-fashioned car sharing clubs, because that's a way of, you know, achieving the same end where people are not owning the cars and they're just sharing them when they need them, because most cars just sit outside your house 90% of the time, like 5% of the time, or outside your workplace. So that, I think a lot of these solutions are much more mundane. You know, it's just like having a load more buses is better than the autonomous. You know, there's a lot of money gone into these autonomous vehicles. I think it's a bit of a Ponzi scheme, to be honest. I think like the Saudis are like investing in Uber. What they want to do is obviously just get rid of taxi drivers so they make loads of money off that, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I agree with the two other speakers, but I would also say the problem that we have at the moment is that cars are too much of a status symbol, so there's too much of our identity invested in them, and I think that is particularly noticeable with the SUV, obviously, because that is the status symbol there is, basically. What I find really interesting is that we were at one point trying to get some planters onto the Wavertree High Street, and we're told we couldn't do that because the planters might be in the line of sight for cars. Well, SUVs are persistently in the line of sight for cyclists, and that's not taken into consideration. So I think, you know, we could, if we are not able to have planters on the high street, we should maybe also not have SUVs. So I think there needs to be a significant shift politically wise in terms of regulation, for example, but also there needs to be actually a real culture change, an educational change in the way we look at cars. Cars are not status objects. They're there to transport people from one place to the next, and that should be it, basically.
Well, God was killing machines in my opinion.
Always slightly amused when some tech figure or other comes up with some variant of an electric car, which involves why do we have more than 4 people in it, and why doesn't it run on its own? Question.
Thank you. I think, Ed, first of all, thank you to all of you for everything you said. You know, this is a really important topic. Ed touched on the topic I wanted to raise, which is what are the systemic things that you think are in the way? For example, you mentioned, Ed, making sure there's enough public transport. And how far do you see it as an individual need to change, and how far do you think it's more to do with systems? For example, should workplaces be responsible for making sure people can easily get to work? Those sorts of things.
Great question, but I think it is, you know, it's one of those things. It's a systemic problem. We've created this system now, and a huge amount of money's been invested in these. You know, if you think about what the car economy involves, like selling cars, repairing cars, selling petrol, like selling insurance, there's so much money in maintaining that economic flow that it's a systemic issue. We've designed cars, we've baked cars into our design processes around urban design for the last 30, 40 years, and that's been the direction of travel. So it is going to be incredibly good, and you know, it's not good enough really to say to individuals, you change, you know, get a bike or whatever. It might not be viable for them to get a bike in terms of where they work, you know, having kids and transport needs to be done redesigning our cities, and I don't know where the money's going to come from that, to be honest. It's one of those things. There are, the policies are starting to fall into place, but at the same time they're putting these policies in place, like I said, that the gear change report, that central government is pushing this, but at the same time they're cutting funding for councils who are going to be expected to deliver. So there is that tension, and I'd have to spend the time thinking about how we get over that. But some of these interventions are cheaper, like low traffic neighbourhoods aren't particularly expensive, I don't think, in terms of segregated cycling infrastructure is very expensive, per kilometre and stuff like that. But, so yeah, great question. I think that's all I've got to say on that.
And I like the idea of getting workplaces involved as well. I think quite a few workplaces try and be involved, but it's really hard because it really requires a holistic approach. So I work in Ormskirk, for example, and I'm lucky because I've got 15-minute regular train going up to Ormskirk that I can get on from Aintree, and then I go on the loop line and I'm at home in no time, basically. So that's wonderful, but a lot of other places don't have that. So I know people who live in Liverpool and need to go to Manchester, and the trains to Manchester have become significantly worse. So even if you want to use alternative methods of transport, you need everyone to be part of the solution in a way. So individual approaches, including actually road design. Road design is absolutely central, but it's not the only main element that needs to be tackled, basically. But fantastic question.
I think everybody has a part to play in the solution, and I agree with your point about the employer being part of that as well. I used to work in Preston at university there, and when I started working there, I bought myself a car, brand new car, and I used to drive every day, 37 miles there, 37 miles back. It used to take me about 35 minutes when I first started, back in 1998. And then it just started to get a bit longer, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, 15, an hour and a half. To the point I thought, I've had enough of this, I'm going to get a motorbike. I'd always wanted a motorbike, so I got a motorbike, and that cut my travelling time right there. And I wasn't stood in traffic, I was taking up less space, it was more efficient. Winter comes, as soon as the frost comes, I wasn't on the motorbike. So I started cycling to the train station, getting the train and cycling the rest of the way. And then in the summer, I thought, hang on a minute, I'm quite a good cyclist, I quite enjoy cycling, why don't I cycle a little bit further? So in the summer, when I wasn't as time precious, I would cycle the entire journey to Preston, get the train home, or vice versa, and then on a really good day, I might actually cycle in, cycle back. Not for everybody, but what I'm saying is I use a variety of modes of transport. I eventually got rid of my car back in 2014 after not using it for 2 years as an experiment, and I was travelling to Preston still. The key problem is that you need incentives. My employer charged me for car parking, that didn't stop me. Okay? Once I couldn't find a space to park, that didn't stop me, I park on side streets. What stopped me is the inconvenience and the friction that it caused me, and I saw better alternatives for my time. And that's what we need to do. We need to add a bit of friction, but we need to provide some solutions to people. Most journeys in cities are less than 3 miles. The problem is, a bus journey still costs you £2.30, £2.40. So if you want to go 1 or 2 stops to go to buy a loaf of bread, it's going to cost you £2.40. Or you can travel 7 miles from the edge of the city to the city centre for £2.40. Surely we need to have that one stop in 10 pence. The entire journey £2.40. That's going to give enough friction for people to leave their cars at home, but an incentive, do you know what, just jump the bus and go to the shops, or go to the, get a drink or meet somebody for lunch. So it's all different things that need to work together.
Karen, stick almost, isn't it? I love that idea of a variable bus fares though, because
Watching that.
yeah.
Like the 1970s.
Back to the future. Any more questions from the audience? Because I think we're almost at the end of our time, I think. Because we promised we'd keep these sessions quick. And we have.
I haven't really got a question.
Use the microphone.
I haven't really got a question, but it was just that kind of, one of the things that all three of your talks kind of summed up was just that kind of sense that more how cycling and alternative forms of transport and just, you know, the shopping local, it kind of created a sense of community. And just how much more of a stronger sense of community there is if you're on foot, if you're on your bike, you know, you're trapped in your little single cell organism of motor vehicle.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? We were talking about food earlier on, and I was saying that by pure luck, I live in an area where there's all these things in walking distance, and you know, it's luck and good fortune because of where I happen to live. That isn't the case everywhere, but again, the more people perhaps do switch away from cars, the more likely that perhaps is happening. Brilliant, thank you very much to all our speakers. I'm going to just go around everyone and just ask you to share with your Twitter handles or how you'd like people to get in touch if they want to get in touch about what you're doing.
I guess if you Google Zero Carbon Liverpool, city region, you probably find us on Facebook or Twitter.
If you have a programme, if you Google my name, I'm at Hull University, so you should find me there. Alternatively, on Twitter, I'm at Telly, as in the television, Telly Elke, as in the Elk.
Okay, I have two Twitter handles. I have the cycling campaign, which is at Cycle Liverpool on Twitter, and I have my personal one, which is a series of rants politically and mostly about cycling and walking and other sports, sailing and surfing, and that's at Armitage MD.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all our speakers. Thanks everyone for organising, and please do stay around for 3 o'clock when we'll be having another one of these sessions, this time on homes and